Coming up on Market to Market. Scores of tornadoes rip through the Great Plains, but farmers still make progress in an annual rite of spring. Hours after authorities unveiled new safety guidelines, another rail disaster fueled by Bakken Crude lights up the North Dakota sky. And a Midwestern photographer focuses on the important contributions and changing roles of women in agriculture. Those stories and market analysis with Mark Gold next.
Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. This is the Friday, May 8th edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. U.S. employers went on a hiring spree last month, bolstering prospects for economic expansion in the months ahead. According to the Labor Department, businesses and governments added 223,000 positions to their payrolls in April. The gain in jobs helped lower the national unemployment rate to 5.4%. That's its lowest level since May of 2008. The government also reports the U.S. trade deficit surged in March to its highest level in more than 6 years, due largely to a flood of imports. U.S. petroleum exports tumbled 7%, reflecting the steep decline of oil prices. This week, however, oil prices rose as the nearby contract topped the $60 barrier for the first time this year. Still, oil prices are down about 40% from their summer high, due primarily to gushing North American crude production. But the boom is not without drawbacks. Responding to numerous railway disasters involving oil shipments, officials recently unveiled new safety rules for trains carrying crude. But hours later, the unthinkable happened again.
Our department's rule is a package of new interdependent regulations that all come together to improve safety. They apply to what our rule defines as high-hazard flammable trains. And they also build on the more than 24 actions we have already taken to enhance the safe transport of crude.
Under intense political pressure, U.S. and Canadian officials unveiled regulations last week aimed to ensure the safety of oil trains running from the Bakken region through both countries on their way to coastal refineries. Thousands of older tank cars, more prone to rupture during wrecks, will be the first to be phased out or retrofitted under a timetable ranging from 3 to 10 years. But on the heels of the sweeping announcement, another rough ride across the Rough Rider state ended with pyrotechnics this week. Heimdall, a town of 20 residents in central North Dakota, was evacuated after 10 tanker cars on a BNSF railway train caught fire following an all-too-familiar train derailment. No injuries were reported as firefighters from 4 area communities responded. Hazardous material teams and federal investigators arrived to examine the scene as well. Last week, North Dakota lawmakers approved a state-run rail safety program designed to supplement national oversight of oil train traffic. Catastrophic railcar explosions have come to represent the dark side of American energy independence.
In truth, the United States is extracting more oil than ever before. The growth in crude production in 2014 was the most since record-keeping began more than a century ago.
As oil production in the Bakken region has increased, so has rail traffic, particularly in North Dakota. Between 2000 and 2012, train trips across the state have increased 233%. North Dakota's Public Safety Commission says 75 accidents related to track and equipment occurred during the same time period, equaling more than $30 million in damages. BNSF officials say the damaged cars near Heimdall were constructed under a 2011 voluntary rail industry standard, intended to make them stronger than older cars, long known to pose safety risks. Federal Railroad Administration Acting Director Sarah Feinberg said in a statement that this week's accident was, quote, yet another reminder of the need for changes resisted by the oil industry, which it says will take years to get unsafe tank cars replaced or off the tracks.
I know that the safety measures that we have outlined today will not be easy, and quite frankly, they will not be cheap. But the financial losses and the costs of cleaning up after such events like Lac-Mégantic would, in the long run, be far more burdensome. And that same thing goes for the damages to our environment that will be prevented. But more important than this, we come back to the beginning, which is we can save in human costs too.
The latest census of agriculture confirmed what virtually everyone in rural America already knew. The number of U.S. farms continues to decline, and demographics are shifting rapidly in the heartland. The census recorded a total of 2.1 million farms in 2012, down more than 4% from the previous tally conducted in 2007. Even though the number of younger farmers grew slightly, America's farmers are getting older. Minorities increase their presence in rural America, but farm country remains overwhelmingly white, and less than 15% of U.S. farms list women as the principal operator. Anyone who's lived and worked on a farm recognizes the pivotal role played by those of the female persuasion, and one Midwestern photographer is documenting their important contributions. Laurel Bauer-Bergmeyer explains.
It is a fact that the majority of farmers in the U.S. are white males. Yet a growing number of women are joining their ranks. Women currently run about 14% of the nation's farms, up from only 5% in the 1980s. A large number of those operations run primarily by women tend to be smaller and more diverse. Even though there are grain and livestock operations among them, many are part of the growing organic and local foods movements. While women have always been an important part of agriculture, photographer Margie Geiler-Alaniz felt they were mostly undocumented.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God made a farmer.
Watching this commercial about American farmers during the 2013 Super Bowl inspired Geiler-Alaniz.
It was this moment where I was like, I dealt with a lot of farm imagery throughout my career, and you know, you just, whatever you see in any magazine or publication that you pick up, and it's never, you just never saw it. So I had this kind of aha moment, as silly as that might sound. I woke my husband up literally at like 2 in the morning, and I was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start photographing women farmers, or women in agriculture, not just farmers, you know, ranchers, whatever. In all types of agriculture.
And the project Farm Her was born. Farm Her documents the important role that women play in the agriculture system. Through photography, Geiler-Alaniz captures women producers running diverse farming operations.
Every single time I am super impressed by them, I will tell you that. They have a work ethic, and they work so hard, and one thing that I will say I see every single time is that they have a passion and a love for what they do. It's hard work, day in, day out. There's no vacations, there's no breaks, you know, and so they love what they do, and I see that time and time again.
Landy McFarland Livingston is one of Geiler-Alaniz's subjects. She is a 6th-generation farmer and a 4th-generation Angus breeder. McFarland Livingston is co-owner of Hoover Angus Farm, a 400-head cattle ranch located in southern Iowa.
I really love Angus cattle. I think it's in my blood. I really do. My great-grandfather started the Angus herd 86 years ago, and you know, I've been born and raised in it. I love the lifestyle. I love the genetics. I love the EPDs, what are expected progeny differences that help us make better beef, and I just love that. I love looking out on a pasture of cows and seeing them be happy, and so it's in my blood. I love it. Well, come here, girls.
McFarland Livingston's operation sells Angus genetics worldwide. It is one of the oldest purebred Angus herds in the nation, and she is proud to be part of Farm Her to showcase that.
Margie's images that I've seen of me are really, they're things that I wouldn't have have expected. I mean, I know I do my chores every day, and she took pictures of me just doing my chores, going about my business. But she has a really unique ability to capture things. And when I looked at those pictures, I was like, wow, that is pretty cool, you know, and that's pretty cool for the consumer to see the things that we do on a daily basis that we don't even think about. I don't even think about, but they're part of what we do.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, that works sometimes. That's a girl.
Lois Reichert is another of Guyler Alanese's subjects. She's been running a dairy goat operation in rural Knoxville, Iowa for more than 8 years. Reichert's small herd of nearly 15 head is made up primarily of La Mancha goats.
Their personalities. They are, each has a very individual and fun personality. I like to say they're a combination between dogs and cats. They have the independence of cats, but the friendliness and most of the time desire to please of dogs. They're just fun, they're loving. I don't know, I still, every day, the most satisfaction I get in my day is looking out and looking at my healthy, happy animals. I don't know why, it just does something for me.
Reichert makes and sells cheeses from the goat milk her animals produce. She sells most of her cheese at the Des Moines Farmers Market, but also ships a weekly supply to a distributor in Chicago. While it was hard being photographed at first, Reichert says Guyler Alanese is good at putting a person at ease.
It was really embarrassing at first, because especially the great big picture of my face. What I really loved were the images she captured of what I do, of the goats, and like I told her, the brushes and the things like that. I was blown away the first time I saw her pictures. They were not at all what I expected. So after the initial embarrassment, it's really been delightful, because it's like I explained to people that this captures who I really am and what I do.
Guyler Alanese says Farm Her also gives women a voice. Many people who visit the website communicate with one another.
If it gives people comfort in that there's others out there doing what they're doing, I hear that all the time, that it's living in a rural area and working by yourself is isolating, and so seeing those other women or having that connection to them just visually is a sense of community.
Having begun in 2013, Farm Her is still in its infancy. To date, Guyler Alanese has photographed 32 women farmers, mostly in Iowa and the Midwest. In the future, she hopes to travel nationwide into other countries to profile many more women.
I feel personally that from a photographer standpoint, that I'm so happy with how they're turning out, and I feel like they're actually showing what I see, or what you would see when you're on a farm. I think they show that, and so that makes me excited. Every time I take more pictures and look at them, I'm like, yay, this is what I wanted to have happen.
For Market to Market, I'm Laurel Bauer-Bergmeyer.
Hoping to promote greater conservation, California water regulators adopted unprecedented restrictions this week on how citizens, businesses, and governments can use water amidst the state's ongoing drought. The State Water Resources Control Board approved rules Tuesday limiting watering on public property, encouraging homeowners to let their lawns go dormant, and imposing mandatory water savings targets for hundreds of local agencies and cities that supply water to millions of Golden State customers. But even as California enters its fourth consecutive summer of drought, Mother Nature displayed her awesome power in a different way this week on the Southern Plains. Dozens of tornadoes rolled through the Great Plains this week, wreaking havoc from Nebraska to North Texas. Oklahoma took the brunt of the weather system that brought heavy rains in its wake. Much of the Corn Belt also experienced wet conditions this week, slowing down the progress of planting. The inclement weather gave producers some forced downtime after last week's sprint that featured ideal planting conditions. allowing for dramatic progress in America's corn and soybean fields. Planting of coarse grains moved at a blistering pace as machinery made passes on more than half the nation's projected corn acres. Among the 18 states that grow the majority of the corn crop, 55% of the acres have been planted. That's a 36-point increase over last week and well ahead of the 5-year pace. Farmers in Iowa and Illinois, the top 2 corn-producing states, have completed nearly 70% of their work. Planters are starting to roll on this year's soybean crop. USDA reported 13% of the acres were planted last week, which is over the 5-year pace of 9%. The winter wheat crop continues on its middle-of-the-road trajectory. This week's report revealed 38% of the crop is in fair condition, while 43% is in the good to excellent category.
Next, the market-to-market report.
Grain futures contracts moved sideways this week as the trade pondered substantial increases in spring planting. For the week, July wheat gained 3 cents, while the nearby corn contract was unchanged. Soybeans rallied this week as the July contract rose 12 cents. Nearby meal followed suit with a gain of $1.50 per ton. In the softs, cotton gave back all of last week's gains and then some as the July cotton contract declined 45 cents per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, May Class 3 milk futures moved 12 cents higher. In the livestock sector, prices also rallied as the June cattle contract gained $2.33. Nearby feeders advanced by more than $2.50, and the June lean hog contract improved by more than $3.50. In the currency markets, the euro moved fractionally higher against the U.S. dollar. Crude oil gained nearly 25 cents per barrel. COMEX gold advanced by $14.40 per ounce. And the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index lost less than 1 point to settle at 446 even. Here now to lend us his insight on these and other trends is one of our regular market analysts, Mark Gold. Mark, welcome back.
Nice to be back, Mike.
We're glad to have you. And today, Friday, was an exciting week in the wheat pit. We saw a 9-cent move in Kansas City. Wheat was up across the board. Talk to us a little bit about what happened.
Well, I think we got a little Mother's Day gift early, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. The wheat market had a little bit of a rally, partly because of the Kansas wheat tour, showing that the crop, does have some problems out there. We know about some of the winter kill in the northwest part of the state, the dryness in the south central part of the state, and it was reflected in their yield numbers at 35.9 bushels to the acre. We made the lows in here Monday night, Tuesday morning, very first part of the month, as we would expect them to, in both corn and wheat. We've had nice rallies since then, and we've got the funds short a fair amount of corn, a fair amount of wheat. And not that there's anything that bullish per se out there, but I think the charts are starting to try to turn here a little bit. And if we can chase some of these funds in, maybe we can get a little bit of a rally in this corn and wheat market.
Do you expect to see some carryover buying on Monday in the wheat pit?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I like the way the wheat closed for a Friday close. It was a good close. We tried to fight. Each commodity at different times was under some pressure during the week, but we came back to have some very decent closes. And again, we made the lows when we should, so why not have a little rally in here?
For producers on the wheat side, hold and let this thing run for a little bit?
Well, we've actually recommended that if you've got wheat sold, and part of our program has been selling wheat, 6-8 months ago, at the mid-$6 range. We're buying back call options to replace some of that wheat we've sold because we believe that, we've had a $2 break in the wheat market. Why not try the long side on some of those sales? So we want to have those calls bought. For the wheat that we still haven't sold, we've got some puts underneath, but we've taken some money out of those, rolled them down, and we'll see where we can go on the upside.
All right. Well, now as we jump into the corn report here, we had a question via Facebook from Rodney in Edgar, Wisconsin. And Rodney's curious, with the rapid speed of planting this year compared to the last couple of years, how big of an impact will that have on the market?
Well, let's give it to the American farmer. Boy, are they good when they want to get in the fields. They get the job done. And I believe this week we'll see the numbers somewhere between 70-75% planted. It's going to kind of take a back burner now to some other issues, but we've done a great job. That's what I believe pushed this market down. We made the lows Monday night, Tuesday morning, after we saw the good numbers of acres that were planted. And I think that news is kind of now shifting away from it. We know that we've got pretty much the corn planted. It'll shift to now getting some beans into the ground. So I think we've kind of already priced that in as we made new lows for the year on Monday night and Tuesday morning. That may be the worst of it. I hope so anyway.
For the farmers sitting still with bins full of old crop corn, how long should they wait to start making some sales?
Well, if we can get a rally somewhere in the May contract, the July contract up to, $394, I think that would be a pretty good place to start looking at making some sales out here. Hopefully, they've had some put options on. We were able to, on those lows on Tuesday morning, we were able to roll down some puts, took some good money out of those, put a new floor in place, so if we go lower, we're protected. But the fact of the matter is, the way I look at this market, I don't see any reason why we can't have a rally between maybe now and maybe into the planting numbers into June 30th. And I think then, if we get the rally then maybe we break it, because I believe we're going to have a lot of corn planted in this country. But in the meantime, until we get some other real news, the dollar's been backing off. We got down to about 94 cents. If we can get that down to 90, that'll inspire some export buying, hopefully. And the exports haven't been that bad. So, why not look for a little bit of a rally here?
See this run for a little bit.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Well, now let's jump into the soybeans. We saw an 11-cent run up this week. Is there room to move ahead of that next week?
That's a tough one. I think somewhat what we're going to see is the funds buying corn, selling beans, buying wheat, selling beans, and they may keep a lid on this thing. The bean market has really been led up here by the oil market, which has at times exploded. We've been up a penny a couple of times in the last week or so. And that's a pretty good move in the oil. And I'd never trust a bean market led by the oil. I like to see it led by the meal. So can the beans have the kind of rally now, particularly until we know we're going to get a lot of beans in the ground? As long as we have the weather that we're having, there's no reason to think that we're not going to see big acres. So I think the beans will have a little bit tougher go in here, but if the dollar comes down, we can see that. One of the things certainly that's hampered the bean market has been the meal market because of the bird flu. We don't know what the bird flu, how much longer it's going to last. Is the warmer weather going to kill off the virus and see things improve? We don't know that. We saw some more cases in Iowa here just in the last 24 hours. The numbers are, significant, but really, when you look at total poultry production, it's a drop in the hat. And yeah, can we lose 20, 30 million bushels of corn demand, some meal demand out here? We can, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to the big issue going forward, which is acres and yield being the biggest factor there.
Things to keep an eye on. Now let's jump into the livestock markets. We saw a good week, pretty well across the board in the meat markets this week. Talk to us about the live cattle contract up $2. Are we headed to 160?
I don't know if we're headed to 160. We've got this big discrepancy between the cash price and the futures price, $10 to $12. And I've been thinking that the cash market is going to back off maybe after this week. We were looking at lower show lists this week. We expected to see higher cash prices. Once we get through this week, the Memorial Day demand, I think maybe we can back this cash price off a little bit. At the same time, I think the futures prices can rally. Maybe we can get to 154, 155, somewhere in that range. Maybe the fat cattle come down 158, 157, somewhere in that range. But I think pretty quickly we'll tighten up that range. The cattle market still looks good. Stock market had a good close. Economy looks good. We're heading into the biggest grilling season. So hopefully we can hang in there and even move higher. I would still caution you, when you're at historically high prices, which we are, within 5% of all-time highs, not to protect this market with some put options to protect that downside. Yeah, they're not cheap, I grant you that. But when you want to look at the risk of $40 and $50 a hundred out here, is it worth spending $4 or $5 a hundred to protect that kind of risk? In my opinion, it is well worth that money.
Especially with a $5, $10, $12 basis working in your favor as well.
Absolutely.
On the feeder cattle side, we saw a nice little run up this week. Are cattle feeders getting more aggressive into this market?
It looks like it. Some of the numbers that the government's been giving us have been a little bit higher. I'm surprised we haven't backed that market off a little bit more, but the demand has been exceptional. And it doesn't seem like there's any chink in the armor, so to speak. So can the feeder cattle move higher? Yeah, maybe they can. Again, while we're hoping for these good prices, would I have options, put options on to protect it? You bet I would. But the whole commodity frame that we talk about, for the most part, grains and livestock, look like we can move higher. The hog market looks great. Looks like it can push to 90 bucks or higher. We made new highs in the cash right now. Futures are acting good. So, yeah, I'm pretty positive. You don't hear me say that very often.
No, we don't.
But,
This is...
markets have made some lows and we bounced, and I like to see that.
Well, I'd like to get into the hog market in a little more detail because it is completely confounding so many of analysts' expectations in January. How much of this run-up, we're at June hogs at 84 and 84.80, how much of this is bird flu and dollar? Is that the predominant mover of those markets?
I would say so, and we're coming into the right season for it. You've got the BLT season, bacon, lettuce, and tomato season. You've got the grilling season. You've got the ribs. So I think it's a combination of all those things. What's maybe the lead? Maybe the bird flu is pushing these hog prices up more than anything else. But again, the dollar's come down 5-6%. Looks like it can even move a little bit lower here. So all these things are adding to a good pork market, and we're seeing good demand out here.
Well, given the fact that bird flu could be in the driver's seat today of this pork market, if this warmer weather starts to limit the outbreak, how much could we see pork back off?
Certainly several dollars. But again, we've got the U.S. dollar to contend with. We've got the good demand out there. So I don't think it's just a one-dimensional market. I think on its own right now, even if the bird flu comes to an end, which we all hope it does, that we can see higher prices in this hog market independent of that. So again, I'm a little bit friendly on the livestock as well.
All right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to join us this week.
Thank you very much.
That wraps up this edition of Market to Market. But Mark and I will continue our discussion and answer some of your questions submitted via our Twitter and Facebook pages in our Market Plus segment online. You'll also find audio podcasts as well as streaming video of our program exclusively at the Market to Market website. And be sure to join us next week when we'll examine the impact of booms and busts on local towns in America's oil patch. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mike Pearson. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com.